Welcome to the worst nightmare of all. Reality.
Explore the lesser-known stories of our unknown world. Join the pursuit of the paranormal with Ash and Greg.
Good evening, good evening, good evening, Ash. How are you?
Melting a little bit in this UK
Have you recovered?
heat.
Have you recovered?
I've just had another 3-hour nap. I think I'm still getting there.
So when we spoke last Tuesday, it was the day before Download Festival.
Yes.
Then you went to Download Festival off-grid, pretty much.
Pretty much bare signal.
In practically 30-degree heat with no shade.
Yeah. Very, very hot and melting.
And I've seen videos of people doing this rowboat thing in a mosh pit or something like that.
It's good fun. It's good fun.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's
It's a crazy thing.
very, very busy. 6 days. Very hot. Very, very hot. Anyone in the UK, we know we've had a bit of a heat wave. The past week and today again, I think it's 31 in my car. When it down to the shop early on. Just crazy heat.
So I got in my car at the end of work today, 4:30. Guess what the temperature was showing in there?
At 4:30.
40.
40.
Well, obviously it wasn't 40 degrees outside, but we're not built for this, Ash.
No, because in the UK, our homes are built to trap the heat in.
Yep.
So when it gets hot, the heat has nowhere to escape, so it just gets hotter and hotter.
Yeah. Rather that than being cold and wet, though. That's the main thing.
Yeah. But at the minute, probably nah. But yeah, if we had the choice, yeah, hot and sweaty rather than flooded out tents.
Yeah, definitely. So this week, last week it was the David Grusch had come forward, and it was a trailer and his sort of statement thing, and it broke on Debrief.
Yeah, the article come out.
The article come out by Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Keane.
Yeah.
Went a bit catastrophically worldwide. The
Say
whole
the
thing
least.
just exploded across everywhere. Daily Mail, obviously, plus everywhere. UFO Twitter was on fire.
Yeah.
Literally on fire. Then you decide to go away. And as we discussed very briefly last night, when you go away, things happen.
Always.
And during your time away, the actual full interview came out, or an hour-long version of the interview came out of Ross Coulthard.
Yeah.
On News Nation. We also had the Las Vegas UFO alien incident, which we'll come on to.
Yeah.
And
we shall come on to that in a bit.
Plus, last night, so Monday in the UK, Steven Greer also had a press event where some whistleblowers were at.
Some more whistleblowers.
So we'll come on to those with equally incredible stories to tell. So we'll try and dissect all that in this episode. Plus, this evening, or this afternoon, this morning, or whenever it came out, was the Weaponized podcast detailing what they knew about David Grusch, because they met with David Grusch a long time ago. So
you can tell me all about it.
Fuck, honestly, we've got so much to do.
We were supposed to record this last night, Monday night, ready to release today, but we had some weird stuff happen with my computer, which doesn't make sense, and I don't know what's happening. It's still happening today.
Just before we come, yeah. So what happened?
Well, I was getting ready to jump on and record the interview, and my mouse. Bear in mind, we literally record the episode, and I switched. Then last week's episode we recorded, and I shut down the computer, ready to go on holiday next day, next early morning or whatever, and everything worked fine. Like it was totally fine. Turned the computer on last night for the first time in a week. No one's been in my house. No one else lives here apart from the partner who's with me. No one else has keys apart from the landlord. I don't think he's going to be messing around with my computer. And the mouse wasn't working. Was the first thing that wasn't working. It's like the left clicker wasn't clicking. I couldn't select anything. I had to try and use the computer to try and log on. So I used the computer keyboard. I put my password in. Then it was like it was a brand new computer. It come up like set up Windows. I was like, what the fuck's this? It's like 3 years old. I've got shitloads of stuff on it. It's not a factory reset itself somehow. But then I couldn't do anything because I couldn't click any buttons. I couldn't work out what to press on the keyboard to control like thing on the keyboard. So I was like, fuck. So I just turned it off again by just hard turn off with using the button. And I checked the mouse. So I took the top cover off the mouse off. And underneath the top cover, there's like 2 plastic bits for each clicker. I hit the right and the left button. But the left-hand button clicker, it must have... There's nothing there. There's like... Should be a bit of plastic which goes into the hole that clicks. But this bit of plastic's not there. It wasn't inside the mouse or anywhere right near the computer. So the piece of plastic that was working the last time I touched it had broken, but isn't anywhere. It's like inside the mouse. It isn't on the desk. It's on the floor. It's just disappeared. So my mouse, I can't click. So I'm trying to use a pen and stick it into the hole to try and click.
I got the photo of that as well.
It's like, so trying to log on, we were trying to record. I was like, I'll be on in a minute. I can't get my mouse to work. So yeah, my mouse was completely fudged. So I tried to get on my phone. I thought, fuck it, we'll just record today. Give me a chance to try and get a computer to work and get a mouse. So I got a new mouse today. So I come to record like literally 10 minutes ago. And my microphone wasn't working. So I checked the cable. And the cable's not plugged in. And the cable's not... My mic's been plugged in probably over a year since I moved the computer to this position. And the USB or whatever, the finger cable is around the front of the computer tower.
Mm-hmm.
But the cable was at the back. Unless it had physically come out and I had physically pulled the cable, which I hadn't even touched the cable in a year, there's no way it could have got out the front to the back of the computer. But the last time I touched it, it was working as we recorded, and I hadn't touched the mic in a week. But it unplugged itself and moved probably nearly a meter around the back of the computer.
Wow.
So my mouse has been tampered with, the microphone's been tampered with, and no one's been in the house for a week. So there's some spooky Men in Black stuff happening. I think.
That was the thing we said Men in Black last time. They don't want you to get the word out, Ash. You know too much. You're in too deep.
Either Men in Black or the ghosts. Cyril has been messing. Yeah. He missed me while I was away.
Maybe. Who knows? So just chalk up as another weird thing that happens when we're trying to record the podcast or get stuff done.
That's what I can't explain at the minute, how this lead. That's the main thing. With the mouse is weird, but the lead, that doesn't make sense at all. Because it's like, it's a long lead. There's loads of like loose cable.
Mm.
So if it's not like I pulled it and it's come round, it's just, I don't know, it's moved itself.
That's weird. Anything else in the house seemed to have moved, no?
To be honest, it's a bit of a mess, so I don't know.
Quite possibly.
I'm getting 2 wardrobes delivered this week, so everything's out of the bedroom. It's now in the lounge. So the lounge is just like full of mess, but not near the computer. But
yeah,
over there, ready to get the 2 wardrobes in there, put everything back in. So it's like in the middle of decorating. But yeah,
wow.
So strange occurrence.
Crazy start to the week. Yeah.
Welcome back.
That's why you get to go and watching Slipknot. Weird shit happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was So we were trying to record this last night, like you say, and it's probably best that we didn't, to be fair. And like you say, gives us an opportunity to sort of take a bit more time and digest what's been going on
Yeah, definitely.
in the press, because when you go away, all hell breaks loose. So we did discuss it as well last night, that you need to go away more often, and that disclosure is only happening because you keep going on holiday.
I am the reason for disclosure, everybody. Not to be narcissistic or anything.
But it's all about you, Ash.
Yeah. I'm not an NPC.
But you are you an NHI?
Potentially. We could be. How would we know if we've been
Exactly.
programmed?
Yeah. And that is a 3-letter acronym that has literally exploded across social media in the world in the last week, really, which stands for non-human intelligence.
Yeah.
So this is a bit of a... So we'll talk about David Grusch then. So David Grusch comes forward, 36-year-old, ex-military, high level, high ranking, and he is one of the advisors on the UAP task force.
Mm.
He worked for lots of 3-letter organizations, some of which I've never heard of. The National Geospatial thing.
Yeah, that one.
Association. Something like that. And has literally come out of nowhere in terms of publicity-wise. And I find it very interesting that somebody based on that level is sort of literally it appears to have just come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Doesn't appear to want anything apart from getting his version of what's been happening out there. So this guy has got top level clearance for pretty much all access passes. He can speak to anybody about anything classified, and he had the opportunity to talk to high-level people about high-level stuff, which at 36 years old is quite an achievement, I would say, personally. I would expect somebody who's sort of like 40s, 50s, who's had a decorated career in the military and their life is military, to be that person. So for somebody to come out, and this guy's well-spoken, he's very intelligent, clearly, very articulate. He knows a lot of stuff that someone like Ross Coulthart could probably pick apart. If you were faking it, you could probably get a few questions. But from what I heard on the interview, everything he sort of said made sense to me from what I know.
Yeah, and Ross does say to him, like, "Are you lying?
Yeah.
Like, is this true? Or like, do you believe that?" Which is probably a good way of wording it, is do you believe that this is true, that this is non-human, this is extraterrestrial, etc.
Yeah.
Obviously, before I go into that, like I say, he co-led the UAP portfolio, and in his own words, he was trusted with the most intimate secrets, and that was why he was kind of picked to be part of the UAP task force.
Yeah.
And he says he was extremely high level cleared, which is odd choice of words. So, like I say, like last week, not totally sure on the exact wording or how it all works in the US military and in the government. But my understanding was that there's different levels of clearance that you get, and that each level has a name or whatever. But he sort of worded it extremely high. Instead of saying I had this level of clearance, I had extremely high clearance, rather than being a bit ambiguous with the wording. That may just be me, but it just seems to be a bit like, if you do have these different levels, like top secret, top secret, whatever.
Top secret.
You see it stamped, don't you, on the documents? Like top secret, blah, blah, blah. And you have to have that clearance. So he just says, I had extremely high clearance. So what is that? What is that extremely high clearance? Was it the top level? Was it a couple levels down rather than being a bit?
Yeah.
And bit curious. And it says that the UAP task force had no access to the crash retrieval program. So not sure whether that was the task force itself, or if he, as part of the task force, did he not have access to that?
Yeah, because I got from it that the UAP task force had been denied access to a large program. So, and that also comes up when we talk about Arrow as well. But yeah, it's. I mean, coming forward and whistleblowing about UAPs is one thing for definite, and that's kind of where we've been. Got whistleblowers talking about. We know that there's objects in the sky, blah blah. But this interview was another level for me. This was, well, I'm not just talking strange things in the sky. We're talking, like you just mentioned, looking into crash retrieval. So fully intact and partially intact craft.
That had either crashed or landed.
Crashed and landed was a big thing for me. It's like, who the fuck is landing? Like, how's this all? This is not just what we're seeing, this tic-tac shaped object or this spherical ball is being seen over like Baghdad and all these different places. This is a whole nother level.
Because if they're saying they retrieved landed craft, so were they tracking it, saw it landed, had a team ready? But for the thousands of UFO sightings that are happening, like, which ones have they tracked or been aware of that were or have landed to then go and retrieve it, whatever retrieval means in this process? It's like, obviously something crashes, there's a crash site, there's going to be possible explosions and debris and all this. But for the landed retrieval, that's quite a big,
landed,
a big thing.
Landed, like you say, that's a whole nother thing. So, and what does retrieval mean? The question you just asked, what does that mean? Does that mean they've actually, in one piece, taken what they found back to places like Area 51?
Did they know it was going to land? Did they have some sort of communication from?
That's the thing, and
whoever.
That in itself, the landed bit is, I think, it's been sort of not. I've been on Twitter, UFO Twitter that's a crazy place. It always has been. But that is one thing that doesn't seem to. I haven't noticed anybody talking about that. Ash, was the landed aspect. How do we know it landed? When? At what point was it known to be landed? And like you mentioned, did they track it? And if they tracked it, then surely this whole like NORAD thing where they've opened the filters more for balloons, that reeks a bit iffy now. I'll be honest, because if
you're getting these things now,
yeah,
then how could they have tracked these things in the past to know where they landed?
And what he doesn't say is he doesn't say how big these things were either. So they could be small, they could be fairly large, but you would think we've had the technology to track these things for a long time. He claims he saw photographs and documents, but it's the one big thing about all of this is there's no actual evidence apart from his credentials and the fact that everybody says he's legit. He is who he says he is. That's one good thing. So you've got people like Bob Lazar that couldn't even prove that they worked anywhere because either records have been deleted or he was lying. Personally, the more stuff that comes out now seems to reinforce what Bob Lazar was saying about crash retrieval and all these sports models and stuff like that, because that would only come from a landed craft.
And the point of sort of how did they know something was landed? Because I don't. This can maybe going off on a little bit of a tangent, but I mean the whole Galactic Federation thing. I personally think that's all bullshit.
Yeah,
I don't think there's some Star Wars type Galactic Federation where all different races talk to each other and all this stuff. But if we sort of talk about if we know they landed and we did get that communication that we knew something was going to be landing somewhere, we had that advanced knowledge from wherever it came from. There's no mention of that in any of the sort of history or any of the people that come forward in the past that the US is in communication with an NHI. It's always been like we've got some of it that's come to air, but with no communication prior to. So that kind of bit doesn't really tally up.
No,
on that side of it,
it's completely, for want of a better word, alien to anything that we've had. Come forward before, and I think that's what it makes it even more unbelievable, but also believable, because everybody's kind of thinking, have we ever been in communication? We must have. They're allowing us to do stuff, or they're watching over us. It almost seems like it's inevitable that there has been some communication. Whether, and when we say non-human intelligence, that's he never mentions extraterrestrials, and he says he's not talking about extraterrestrial origin. He describes the origin as non-human intelligence. So, which is a good phrase, because
yes,
and the more and more we've spoken about this on the round tables about where these things are from. Are they from here? Are they from our future? That kind of thing. The more we talk about it, the less I think is from another planet. The less I think is from Mars or an outer planet. The more I think it's from here. And that when I say here, he actually talks about it during the interview as extra-dimensional.
Yeah.
And that's something that we've covered off many times. Is, again, it's a convenient box to tick because it answers a lot of questions.
Yeah.
But it also gives an answer, a credible answer, because there are parallel universes, scientists think, due to quantum physics and stuff I'm out of my depth talking about.
Head smashing stuff.
Yeah. But if there's a possibility that stuff exists, which these scientists believe it does, then it's not out of the realms of possibility that these NHIs are from those places.
Yeah, I mean, I say go back to NHI again. It's ambiguous. He says earlier in the interview he's not saying extraterrestrial, but then later on he kind of alludes that it is. He doesn't say it, but he's alluding to it. And I put here on my notes for that question for us: what does this mean? What does NHI mean? Right, non-human could be AI. I say it could be. He talks about different dimensions and things like that as well. And I mean, most people, and I think, like I say, it does allude to it later on in the interview, are gonna associate that with alien, with ET, because we're talking about spacecraft, for want of a better word, crashing, landing, being retrieved as non-human. But a key point, which you did say, is there's no evidence. There's documents and photos, which we've all seen, very similar stuff that's been leaked and put out. Some of it fake, some of it not fake, and a lot of his stories or his proof that for the reason that he believes it. Because the way Ross was asking the questions is like, what makes you believe this stuff? Why do you believe this stuff? And he's like, I've been told. I've been briefed on this.
Yeah.
What does I've been briefed mean? Was there an actual briefing he was part of, or is it someone's had a quick word with him in the corridor and said, "Oh, by the way, is that a briefing? Is it just hearsay? Is it actual stuff?" I've been told by obviously different people within different intelligence communities, with different factions of the military, the Air Force. I've been told it does appear to all be anecdotal. Obviously, he's got this stuff that he said he's given to Congress.
Mm-hmm.
But again, is that anything which is hard, factual evidence? Or is it just hearsay or anecdotal? It's like when people talk about, the CIA have got files on sort of these propulsion systems and Russians doing this. Like, yeah, they got files on it, and the files just say the Russians said they did this. The CIA aren't saying they did this or this exists. The files say, the Russians saying they do this. And the people are like, oh my god, the CIA have got these files saying levitation or whatever exists. And they got files saying the Russians say it exists.
Mm-hmm.
They've not got the evidence themselves. So there are files on it, but the files themselves don't actually prove anything. So
Correct.
That's the same thing that we're going to see here.
And one point, I know we're sort of going backwards and forwards on the interview a little bit, but he actually mentions the fact that he actually questioned himself whether or not he was being fed a lie, basically. And he was becoming a bit of a patsy, and he was being fed false information. And it took him 4 years of like looking at it to establish that what he was being told was actually fact. I say factual. It's you never know, because these government agents are very clandestine in what they do. They have a way of doing stuff. But the fact that he says he took 4 years, because Ross Coulthart asked him some very good questions, very good questions indeed, I thought. And all of the ones I was just about to ask myself, because obviously we do interviews, and not to that level, but we do interviews and we talk to guests, and there's always something they'll say and it triggers a question. And he was talking, I was thinking, God, we need to ask him that question. And then Ross Coulthart came out with that question. So it was nice to see the interview flow and Ross asking the right questions. Begs the question, was David Grusch given these questions beforehand? Possibly. I would hope not, because that takes away from a bit of the credibility. If you're just interviewed on the spot, it's probably a little bit harder to sort of
plan.
Yeah, you can't plan.
Know what you're saying,
yeah, you could be caught out quite easily. So yeah, that was quite interesting. He talks about the fact that he spent 4 years checking testimonies of all of his contacts, and he said all of them have very high levels of accreditation, like you mentioned at the start, and are all coherent, which has convinced him. He said there are dozens, if not hundreds, of other people in these programs who want the information to see the light of day, which is interesting. Again, no mention, I don't think I heard him mention Lou Elizondo at all. There was no talk about these other big names.
No.
Because obviously Lou was big in some of the early programs as part of like what is now Arrow and the task force.
Yeah.
So it's very weird. But there are a couple of things that kind of not worried me, but kind of piqued my interest a little bit. He talked about like the gimbal footage, talked about the Tic Tac footage, all that kind of stuff. And there was also the footage of that one in Omaha where the orb shaped thing dropped into the sea.
Yeah.
I say dropped, it slowly entered the sea. It didn't drop into sea. And he says that was really anomalous. Cool. It looked impressive on the video. However, at the NASA briefing last week, or just nearly 2 weeks ago now, they actually said it was a sensor issue, and it was like the way the sensors work. So it wasn't anomalous. It was an artifact of the equipment they were using, which I know we haven't really touched on the NASA bit either, but it's it was stuff like that you just think, who is telling the truth now?
I mean that stuff. I mean, I've got quite a bit of notes on all the different sort of things he talks about, like
Yeah,
tic-tac,
you crack on.
The gimbal,
Mm-hmm.
and even sort of talking about the interdimensional stuff, or sort of always being here. These are quite common tropes that we hear a lot about, and I don't want to I don't want to maybe seem being a bit mean to him. I'm not taking anything away from him. I mean, I was kind of skeptical last week when we talked about it, and watching the interview did make me a bit more skeptical. Because he starts talking about, like, say, tic-tac, and some of the cross-retrieval stuff, like the 1933 Italian one, retrieval mentioned about the Vatican and all this stuff, and all this is, we already know this stuff. Roswell says he just can't give any further information, but then goes on to say that the 1994 report was basically rubbish, and has a lot of, basically it's a hack job. But that's his opinion. The tic-tac stuff, I think that's just his opinion. And it also, like, he's done studies, or maybe had, obviously, yeah, but he has got more information access that we have. We're going to talk about these very, very common UFO stories that we know about, like the Maelstrom base incident, about the UFO shutting down the nuclear things. Again, and he talks about that, and he's talked about that saying, like, the reasons why he thinks the UFOs were shutting down or being over nuclear base, or checking out where we're at with the nuclear sort of side of things. Is it scientific experiment by them to see where we're at? They're just probing. It's all his opinion on very well-known things. And I was thinking in my head, listening to him talk, this is like a Twitter thread. It's like you could hear all this, the exact same, everything he's saying, you could read on UFO Twitter.
Yep.
It's nothing, he's not presenting anything different apart from his opinions.
Exactly.
On all these stories. And, like, he says, again, one quote I've got here is that not explainable by prosaic means. Again, that's just his opinion. As he says, I got this document, and this full report was carried out, and no way this could have been human made. Fair enough. But it's not, it's just him saying, again, anecdotal, so someone's opinions. It's not human. He talks about the materials, again, these sort of exotic materials, having these isotopes and sort of chemical numbers in the high ranges.
Yeah.
That was no way they could have been designed by humans. Is he a physician? Is he a scientist to be able to sort of come out and say that these couldn't have been human made? These got to be non-human designed materials. It's all very, like I say, it's everything he was talking about. I was like, he not saying he has, but he could have got all this off UFO Twitter, and because there wasn't anything different to what we've heard and read 100 times before.
One bit he does cover off, where he talks about the technologies and materials. It says that they've been entrusted for expertise to certain private contractors, which he doesn't name. But, I mean, there was two, well, certainly one that came to mind anyway, which was Lockheed Martin, because they've got the Skunk Works, and they do. You only have to watch the latest bloody Top Gun video, film. I don't know if you've seen it.
No.
Absolutely cracking film. Well worth a watch. To see Tom Cruise at the start piloting a test vehicle to push Mach 10 in this, like, stealth bomber, and it's a Skunk Works plane. And it's well known that Lockheed Martin and Skunk Works are part of the black projects, that this billions and billions of dollars get swallowed into this black hole. But certain private contractors, I thought Lockheed Martin straight away. The other person I thought of straight away was Robert Bigelow. And he is a big proponent of UFOs. He claims ETs, again, for want of a better phrase, aliens have been here, are here, and the government knows it. But very much like David Grusch, and like you just said, he's not actually, there's nothing new coming to the table. The fact that the government would put crash retrieval stuff in the hands of a private contractor who's skilled in that probably isn't too far out of it. They'll go, what's this material made of? Can we develop it? Is $1 billion. Just tell us about it afterwards, kind of thing. Don't give me a receipt.
And again, that's something that we know.
Yep.
It's like even kind of, is it positive? Is a similar vein to the stars. They wanted they got some materials that they paid ever much for and stuff, and it's again private companies. Obviously, they weren't thinking about the government, but given them, they got the money, let them have a crack, and then sort of see what happens from there. But again, nothing that we haven't heard from other people in the past. I think one of the comments you had last week was, is it just going to be another name to add to the list of people that over the decades have come out and said this stuff without actually any proof? Which is what we don't want to see, is that it just becomes another face, another name that said it. We want to see. Hopefully something will come out of it. But having listened to the interview, there's nothing yet to say this is going to be any different.
So there was the complaint that he's raised last year in May, which adds to his credibility. Because again, we can only go on stuff that we can see. And as we've put on posts on social media, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. And we're not seeing any proof, really. Now, he's made a complaint to the Inspector General, basically saying and talking about, so go back a bit. So he left the military in May or April, I think, this year. And this was after he was told he was okay to talk about stuff, which, as we've just established, hasn't really talked about anything that we didn't already know. But like I said right at the start, he's very articulate. He clearly knows his business, and he is who he says he is. So his credibility in terms of what he's done in the military is not in question. And I think if that was in question, he wouldn't be anywhere right now. He wouldn't have blown up the internet this last week. So that they've got the right person out there, because he can tick all the boxes. You can trust me. I know what I'm talking about. I've been involved and whatnot. And he's raised a complaint about the fact that Congress and Arrow and previous task force have not had the level of clearance required to see the documents. So when Sean Kirkpatrick comes out and says that Arrow have got no credible evidence that anything with displaying exotic abilities, paraphrasing slightly, technically he's not wrong, because he may not be, and it's clear that he isn't, of a high enough level of clearance to see the documents. So they could show him it and say, look, this is all the stuff that you need to prove everything you're talking about. However, you can't read them because you haven't got clearance. And then he can only ever say, we've not seen any credible evidence, because he's not lying. But then you kind of go, well, how can you be the right person for the job if you're not even got the level of clearance required to see some of the weird stuff that David Grusch is on about with recovered craft, and because that's like a whole nother level of just seeing spheres. This is bizarre stuff, especially when he says that there have been cases of deaths due to these non-human intelligences, in addition to the threat hanging over US strategic sites, Maelstrom, those kind of things. And I know we briefly spoke about the fact that at Virginia, that firefighter that grabbed hold of, was it firefighter? Guy,
is it?
a police officer, wasn't it? Sorry.
Yeah.
Grabbed hold of this alien being, or this non-human intelligence, going down that route now, and then became ill and whatnot. So it's not without the realms of possibility if we've had close encounters with NHIs that we're like an undiscovered tribe seeing a new person for the first time, and we're just getting all their germs and all their horrible stuff.
Being cynical again.
Yep.
That mention of a human. I'm not sure. Does he say American or does he just say human?
Human. There are cases of deaths due to these NHIs. So he doesn't specifically say who.
So he could be referring to that Virginia again.
It could well be.
He's what's moment of contact.
Yeah.
He's read about it on Twitter, and I was saying humans have died as a result of non-human.
That's a good shout. I hadn't thought of that.
If he said Americans or American servicemen, women, whatever, then that'd be a different thing where we have do you have the records to show that a serving military personnel in the US have died as a result of something non-human, rather than saying a human. Means that at any point in history, is that
it just basically recently? There have been cases of deaths. Now that could also cover off a landed craft that's been retrieved, that's been worked upon, and they've died as a result of that. Because exotic materials can't be good for our health, I'm sure, with certain stuff.
Radio,
yeah. So it's definitely not groundbreaking new stuff that probably you, like you mentioned, you could go through a Twitter feed of any big name on Twitter, and like yourself, Ash, and and sort of get this narrative, watch moment of contact. You've spoken to a few people, like all the norms, Nick Pope. You speak to all these kind of people. Is he going to be another name on the circuit like that? Hopefully not. And hopefully he brings stuff to the table, which he's done. He's certainly got the message out there.
And like I said before on the UAP roundtable and stuff, just because someone is a military person, a pilot, a Harvard scientist, professor, whatever, biologist, whatever Gary Nolan is, just because they are obviously very intelligent, got high level jobs in their industry, doesn't mean they aren't also prone to just being a believer. And then we see it many times just in sort of the normal population.
Yep.
Where people can sort of become open to something, like ourselves. I wouldn't have thought any of this was related, paranormal, Bigfoot, UFOs, and now I'm like, it's all fucking the same fucking mad shit. They've just not had the same sort of mindset changed, and that they are now more prone to believe. So you might have seen some stuff that was legit. And now when we're talking about like the 1933 Italian retrieval, Roswell, Maelstrom, Tic Tac, is now just become more open to believing it. And just because he is an intelligence official, ex-military, doesn't mean that it's more true now because he said it. Just something that I always think you have to bear in mind, that just because someone is high level doesn't mean that it's necessarily any more true than me saying it or you saying it.
Correct. And I think the more you're immersed in it, the more you get swept up in it, maybe. because your life then revolves around it. So your only influence on a lot of this subject matter is people with these accounts that coming forward, again, whether they're true or not. But if you start believing more of those, because there's so many, and you go, well, surely there's thousands of people having these experiences, they can't all be lying. Well, they could be all lying, potentially. I mean, it's not the kind of thing you probably lie about too much. And I know back in the 80s and that, if you even said that you were an abductee or something like that, you were proper lunatic out on the fringe of society. You couldn't mention stuff like that.
And it was his job for 4 years.
Yep.
His full-time job. And I guess, I mean, and we do know, not just in UFOs, but in any sort of police intelligence, GCHQ over here, social media is used to gather intelligence. It's a big part. Like even messaging apps, social media are used by police to get information, to find people. And it's even been talked about that there's even some accounts on Twitter that are intelligence officials.
Of course.
So there's no doubt that he would have been, as part of his role, on these social media sites like Twitter. For sure, I'm pretty convinced that he would have been on keeping an eye on stuff, because some of the stuff comes out on Twitter is good. Stuff does get leaked on there. So they would have had to have been, I think, on UFO Twitter pretty much to find stuff and keep an eye on different people and things like that. So
and that's what they do to extremists. They just follow them and watch them and report on them and sort of integrate into that world. So it's undercover police officers. They will infiltrate gangs and stuff like that. They just become part of the gang or slowly work themselves in, maybe chuck in a bit of decent information every now and again that people are. So yeah, like you say, UFO Twitter, you can be so anonymous on Twitter that I don't even know who I'm talking to. I could be talking to David Grusch on a Twitter conversation about some random guy's post about Virginia and moment of contact, and he's just pulling out all this information from everybody and just like scalping data left, right, and center. So yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
I think one point I don't think we've mentioned. It's sort of obviously he got clearance to say all this stuff, all the publicist stuff, and would the Pentagon or whoever clear this stuff if it was actually classified top secret information? Would they allow him to say, "Yeah, go on, you can go say all this in the national media," if it was actually top secret information?
But then I was thinking, if they knew what he was going to talk about, because clearly they've vetted what he was going to say, and they go, "We can't fucking prove that. He can't prove that." They're going through a list going, "He can't prove that." Everybody knows about Roswell. Everybody knows about Maelstrom. It's not really like, I'm just thinking of it like that. The fact that he can't prove any of this, apart from the fact that he is who he says he was, and he worked on these projects or on this task force. They're like, fill your boots, mate. Because even if some of it's true and some of it's like been fed information, he said he even likes to think he's got a bullshit meter and can smell it. But if you're that in deep and they are so good at what they've refined over decades and decades, probably hundreds of years, governments have been perfecting disinformation. Because no doubt some of the stuff that is let out there on Twitter and on YouTube, I mean, Lou Elizondo said that there is a legitimate Black Triangle video out on the internet.
Yeah.
But nobody knows which one it is. And it's all those little bits. And they're basically saying to him, Pentagon's cleared me. Okay, yeah, because you haven't really said anything that nobody doesn't really know about. The fact that you talked about crash retrieval projects, how are you going to prove it? Because Arrow hasn't got access to that information because they've restricted access. So where they're going to find it, it's way above their level. He does mention that there have been attempts and techniques developed to shoot down UFOs, or UAPs, sorry. Again, what are they? He can't tell you. And
I guess you would be like I guess for the extraterrestrial stuff, like probably there will be a plan like, if something did, because you are planning for all eventualities, and if Independence Day occurrence did happen, then what would we do? As like say shooting down, having some sort of military plan in place, because it is an eventuality that, especially someone like the US government that pumps so much money into it, that they will have some. It might only be like a very small some note of some defence document, but they will. There's no doubt that I reckon the UK will have the same thing. Where if this happened, this is the response. This is not a few people have probably seen it, but it is there for obviously the high level generals, or whatever. To if it happened, they've got that there to go off.
There has to be something, like you say, even if it's just a paragraph somewhere, just saying, when shit is the fan, this is what we're going to do. We're all going to go to bunkers and fuck everybody else. That's probably more realistic than anything else. He does mention that there are craft. Some of these craft are up to 100 meters in size, which, again, no proof. Where's that come from? And he also said that there's an ongoing competition between different nations to develop technologies, but at the same time, they fear the impact on the population. So, but what I don't get, and this is one thing that always gets me, that if we've had crash retrieval and potentially going back to the 30s, probably way before that, to be fair, why are we still driving around in cars that are powered by essentially dead dinosaurs and oil? Why are our planes only able to do like Mach, whatever, 2, 3? If we've got this technology that we've had for nearly 100 years, that's so advanced, why we're clearly not doing anything with this technology? Surely, because what is it?
Grusch or someone else that said they basically didn't know how to. Like they had it and they just didn't know how to reverse engineer. It's just like we know they can do it with this, but we just don't know. So they just stopped trying. I can't remember who it was that was saying it, but it was someone similar, like sort of government person.
But that's what baffles me. It's like, yes, we might well have crash technology or landed technology, which is even scarier. What? Clearly, you could argue that some of our technology or some of that technology might have been used in products that we see nowadays that we use, potentially. Stuff that just a few years ago, a couple of decades ago, wouldn't, like the internet, all this kind of stuff.
Fibre optics, some of the people say.
Yes.
That sort of revolutionised the internet and being able to transmit information very quickly.
Yeah.
Sort of came about from nowhere.
Yeah. It's those kind of things rather than necessarily, I suppose, advanced and exotic aircraft, because aircraft hasn't really changed that much. Like designs haven't really changed that much, even from like World War One, where you think the Wright brothers first obtained flight, about 100 and so years ago? And in that time, yes, we've got this Raptor fighter thing, this European jet thing, that stealth jet that flies via electronics, but essentially it's still a jet-powered plane with a certain amount of technology. But
and there's still basically a nose, 2 wings, and a tail, like on the grand scheme of things.
So what the other bit that did pique my interest as well, apart from a lot of it, to be fair, it was an interesting conversation to watch. And again, hats off to Ross Coulter. I thought he interviewed him very well, and he did ask decent questions. David Grusch said he would like to know more if more in-depth contacts have been made between NHI and the US. which is interesting because that could go back to this whole landing thing. And one bit that you mentioned I hadn't really thought about is AI is non-human intelligence. And if it is AI that is behind a lot of this, and we're talking like Terminator, Skynet type shit, no wonder Elon Musk and everybody's like saying we need to tone this down a little bit, this AI ChatGPT stuff, because if it gets too clever for its own good, it might not be future us, these Tic Tacs, and it might not be future humans, it might be future AI. So what do you think then? What are you thinking about the whole interview? What do you think about David Grusch? What do you think is going to happen? I knew you'd say that.
I know it's mad because I don't want. I'm excited about it. It is something a bit different to what we've had recently with shitty videos and photos being leaked and all that stuff. I think it's just wait and see. This is about the general complaint. See if anything at all comes of that we hear about.
Yeah.
That information that he's apparently got a big package for Congress saying that it misled. Obviously, the complaint states that they intentionally misled Congress and not provided factual stuff basically to Congress. But again, if they don't have the clearance for Congress, if the congressmen women don't have enough security clearance, and so they complaint may not go anywhere because the intelligence community will say you don't have the clearance to see this information. It's national security, it's national defense. We can't give you that information.
It's mad because it just goes back into the background again, and the government say, well, we're not aware of anything, we've not been given, nothing's been disclosed to us. And I think that was some of the whole point that David Grusch was getting to, was the fact that there is all this stuff here, but people are not allowed to see it. Therefore, Arrow and UAP Task Force, those kind of groups are essentially useless is not a great word, but based on what they can see and what they need to see are two different things.
Like got Kirkpatrick, who like say looks totally disinterested in that hearing. Maybe it is because he's like, I've not been got. We haven't got anything. Like
he knows that he can't see any. Yeah.
So it's like it's a pointless endeavour.
Yeah, but it would be nice if he came out and said, look, I can't see all the stuff. I'm not cleared to see it, but he hasn't said that. He's just saying we haven't seen any credible stuff. But then he goes to the whole NASA briefing a couple of weeks ago and says that we're seeing metal spheres all over the world. And it's just like, well, surely they fit under the whole exotic kind of strange abilities, stuff we can't identify. I don't know. It's very murky. It's very murky. But what I do want to touch on is the fact that Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp actually had access to David Grusch and were introduced to him a long time ago. Weirdly, in a bar following a Star Trek convention, something like that. It was something, obviously, it's a strange setting, but there was other big. I think Gary Nolan was there as well. Jeez. It was like a bit of a wild party, I'm sure.
Bit of a Galactic Federation meeting.
Yeah. Check out one of our previous podcasts, Dr. Christopher Macklin, where he talks about Galactic Federation. So they've said that the question that come up was, why were they not the ones to break the story? And that, I was thinking that if they've had that, why did they not want to break the story? And on a Weaponized podcast that got released today, so I only got halfway through it before we came on, they talked about the fact that the New York Times article, George Knapp was going to break that story back in 2017.
Right.
He was going to break that story, and he was told that he would be able to talk about it when he was allowed to. Then it came out in New York Times, and the whole thing blew up 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Okay.
And he said, I'm actually quite glad that somebody else did it that wasn't me, because if it had been George Knapp, it would have been, this UFO reporter from Las Vegas is breaking this story about secret government programs, and it doesn't have as much weight behind it as like New York Times.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, Leslie Keane was a UFO reporter for many years. Yes.
But considering George Knapp broke Bob Lazar's story all them years ago, so again, they could have broken this story, I think, but it was best that they didn't, type thing. They knew about David Grusch, they knew about all of this stuff. They've released the version of the complaint in full, the report and everything. So yeah, it's just at times when you think like Jeremy Corbell, yeah, he's that character on there.
Yeah, so we posed that question last week, was if Corbell did release, was the person that was interviewing name on that news show?
Yeah.
What do you sort of change your opinion or your initial opinion? And for me, well, it's anytime I've before I've even seen anything. I mean, probably not the best mindset to have, but when I see Corbell teasing something he's about to release, I'm like, fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Where that, I mean, it's probably not, like I say, not the best mindset to have, but that's because most stuff he puts out is shit.
But the thing is, because we've been fed so much misinformation, disinformation, incorrect information over the years, and everybody's teasing stuff saying this is coming, and then you get like a news channel breaking this story and the debrief website getting the story out, and they're saying that they had to move quick on it. Leslie Keane and Ralph Blumenthal said they had to move quick to release it because I think somebody was going to leak it or something like that. That was my impression I got from the Weaponized podcast today, that they had to go quickly with it because it was going to come out otherwise. Right. So, yeah, it's fascinating. It's exciting.
It's got people talking. It's got newcomers probably interested.
Yeah.
This is what we need. Fresh blood, fresh people.
Yeah, that's the thing. And this guy has come out of nowhere and he's like lit up the UAP world. And people like us are now on our second episode in 7 days of talking about this same guy and the claims he's coming out with. So they're doing something right. And just incidentally, last week's episode was our most successful episode ever. And it was our most successful episode by about five times our day one sort of volume of listeners, all in day one for this episode. So that was insane. So it's definitely an interesting, a topic that people are interested in.
For sure.
So that covers off David Grusch and a bit of the Weaponized podcast. And I know we normally would cut it off here, but so do you want to go? Should we go into the other big event that happened yesterday, which was Dr. Steven Greer?
Let's do a bumper episode.
Yeah, why not? Value for money for everybody. And so I caught this about halfway through, I think. And I was just like, oh, here we go. Steven Greer. He hasn't got the most amazing reputation, certainly between us lot, and the fact about his C5 apps and wanting to make the world a connected place, yet he's open for everybody, but he's charging money. Yeah. Then you've got these contact in the desert type events where you're not allowed to film yourself. You have to basically trust what's going up in the sky.
You have to sign NDAs.
Yeah. And they're the only ones that can take the photographs now, which It's very shady. And I think somebody called him out because there was an aeroplane or something. It was actually in the air miles out to sea, or miles out from where they were with lights on. So it made it look a bit.
Yeah.
So the reputation he's got in the UFO community, the UAP community, whatever you want to call it now, is divisive at best.
At best, yeah.
And lacking credibility somewhat in the least. He puts on this event yesterday. I wasn't really aware of it until over the weekend. And then you hear something saying that Dr. Steven Greer is doing a free to access presentation.
Disclosure 2.0.
Yeah.
As he calls it.
I did see a comment that said Steven Greer and free in the same comment. Didn't seem to compute very well, which made me laugh. So, yeah, he gave the world an insight into some more whistleblowers, alleged whistleblowers. Now, looking at UFO Twitter and social media, mainly UFO Twitter, because everybody's fucking brutal on that, for want of a better phrase. And if something's said that isn't liked or people questioning, they're not backwards in coming forwards with their opinions, which is great. It's a bit wild at times, but it is on the whole good. So he gave a platform for certain people to come up and tell their experience. It was pretty raw. It wasn't high production values. It was literally some people in a room at a desk and a podium and people coming up and talking. Whether that lends credibility or not, I don't know. But
I only watched it's what, a 3-hour sort of things. I've only watched well, I've sort of clicked through different bits, just trying to kind of get an idea of what was kind of being said and all that.
So I caught, I think the last 3 people talking was Stephen Digner Jr. onwards, which is a guy who straight away said, look, I've got brain injuries, but I want to tell my story. I found him very credible myself, just based on him speaking. And all 3 of the people that I saw speaking, I got a sense of genuineness about them. But again, that's anybody can probably pull the wool over my eyes. Do you know what I mean? But going on what I saw, putting aside the Steven Greer thing, and being presented with these guys' accounts of what's happening, if we were to interview them on the podcast, I would probably come off and go, that sounded like something's happened to these people.
Yeah.
The emotions they showed, again, were, I don't think it's stuff you can fake, but again, I don't know. But incidentally, there was a 4th one that I missed the start of that's been in the Daily Mail this week, which was Michael Herrera. Yeah. Not Royal Marine. I don't know what they call them in America. Like a Green Beret type kind of soldier. I don't know what they're. I can't remember what they called them. Anyway, they were going out. They were on this mission. They were going out to recce the place, and they came across this fucking huge UFO hovering 15 to 20 foot off the ground. And as they started to get closer to it, some unmarked, what appeared to be US military kind of guys, basically pulled their weapons out and told them to stop, unclick safeties, and obviously said, this is quite serious now, you need to fuck off, basically. And it was his account of what happened there. They got all their guns, had the ammunition taken out of it. These guys were rocking American pistols, American higher spec assault rifles than what these guys had, the army guys had. And they're in this clearing. There's a couple of souped up, I think it was 4 souped up, like Ford Rangers. Is that what they call it? Like the big SUV type thing. So I think they said they were F-350s, which are the big things that contractors drive around in this country. One of them had like a trailer on the back, like a container on the back, with what appeared to be like a gas cylinder, something like that, feeding in. So he didn't know if it was like to pressurize something or to like vacuum seal something. And he got the impression that these guys were either smuggling drugs, like high volumes of drugs, or something else as well. Yet there's this fucking UFO hovering and making a buzzing noise. He said if you took the headphone cable out of an amplifier, like electric guitar amplifiers, that kind of noise, like a white noisy kind of rumbly. He said that was. He said if you could play me that sound again, he goes, I would know it exactly. And I could say that was what it was. Long story short, because I missed most of it, but he said this UAP, the top triangular sort of shaped, pyramid shaped thing, met with the rest of the craft, went into one unit, and it shot off at about 4,000 miles an hour. How he knows 4,000 miles an hour, I don't know. But it was at instant speed, and it didn't affect the coconuts swinging in the trees. It didn't affect the leaves. There was no sonic boom. There was nothing. It was just there, then it wasn't. It was gone. The guys were told that they didn't see anything. They just had to turn around and fuck off. They tucked the bullets and magazines and everything back in the trousers of the soldiers, the Marines. And this guy was saying that it was positioned in such a way on their bodies that they couldn't just quickly pull out, load a gun and attack. They were literally on death's door if they tried to do anything.
Seemed like...
And he's waited 15 years to tell this story. He claims that these guys also had, say if they were going out to capture Osama bin Laden, people like that, they got these devices, almost like mobile phones, where they can do fingerprints in the field and it sends it off to wherever via the World Wide Web, and they can establish if that person is who they say they are. So they had bits of equipment like that. So they're like mobile phones, a bit like an iPhone type device, but obviously it's 2000 and early 2000s. So it's like that technology wasn't even around then. So he said it was all very shady, unmarked people, no military insignia, no badges, nothing. Again, no proof.
Seems weird that, I mean, why were they in that place? Were they sent there for purpose, or was it just completely coincidental?
I think they literally came across it just by accident. It was a bit like, shit, what's all this about?
It seemed mad that they would kind of accept. Like, so obviously, once say they got back to base, whatever, and then obviously got the group of them or the core of them, whatever. Like, did they talk about it between themselves? Because if these guys haven't identified themselves,
no, they didn't. They didn't identify themselves at all. I'm just trying to.
What would stop them from reporting that to? So if they said they reported to their higher ups, but then nothing had happened from it or whatever.
I'm just trying to find the story about it, just so I can give you the full spiel on what the rest of it was, because
I mean, the craft sounds amazing.
Yeah, and he was quite specific. There was a drawing of it on the presentation of his interpretation of it. Big thing as well. And Hovering said never seen anything like it, obviously. who has.
And two pieces to kind of join together, and then
so like this pyramid on top sort of like became part of it, and then. And this is the problem. There's so many different versions of events that people go through as part of their experiences that surely they can't all make up different stories, or even the ones that are similar. They can't all be similar, happening to different people. Completely, like this is, if this is what it says it is, and it's extraterrestrial tech, whatever, NHI tech, being used by private contractors, which are probably linked to military, let's be honest. They're either smuggling drugs or something's happening that is not to be seen by many people. That ask more questions than the fact there's a UFO there.
Under if in these circumstances, so kind of relating to this story, but maybe more general as well, is if they'd come across something like high-level drug deal involving military or whatever, this clandestine group, to like similar. This is sort of talked about in Roswell as well, where not Roswell, when there's some incident where they're kind of something was trialed on them, so they were hallucinating.
Yep.
So something put in the forest. Once they came across them and told them to do one, they did then sort of send some gas or something that then made them hallucinate, and then all of their perception of what they're seeing. So what they had seen might be something completely normal and explainable, but highly top secret.
Yeah.
And then they've been given this drugs or whatever has made them perceive it differently or remember it differently. So they remember this big craft. So when they then talk about this big craft, they lose credibility because it sounds like a too far-fetched story. So it's just like a method of basically covering up their own whatever they're doing.
And we know, like you say, they're at Rendlesham, that area, they did do that. So it's, who knows? It's entirely possible. And you think people who are on DMT, they and ayahuasca and these kind of natural hallucinogens, they tend to have similar experiences whereby they see the same kind of entities as part of their experience, that everybody seems a similar type creature and stuff like that. So why that, mass hallucinogen in the forest?
Because they could have saw what was going on. It could have been secret craft, whatever, but then if this drug, whatever, made them see a 10-foot giant pink rabbit, and he's like, we were sent to this place, we saw this giant 10-foot pink rabbit, and then these guys in non-uniform came and warned us off and took our ammunition and stuff. It
sounds crazy.
So you just lose all. Just completely lose credibility on it,
even if it was what you experienced. So and this guy apparently had kept it quiet for 15 years, and I suppose now is a great time to start talking about experiences, whether or not it's an event that actually happened in the real world, or it was an event that happened in his mind, in terms of, was it a secret trial of some hallucinogen or whatever, like you say, to cover up a black project. Who knows? So he was one that I caught the end of, which was interesting. I'd read his story in the Daily Mail, of all places. Seemed to be breaking stories left, right and centre. Then it went on to this I do apologise, he's not a doctor. Steven Greer Jr. So he was like the fastest promoted guy. He wasn't frontline military. He was the head of, managed the largest live fire practice base in the world in the Mojave Desert, which incidentally is where flares. But he was the one who would give the go-ahead as to whether or not a live fire ammunition thing was going to take place. So he claims that they were out one night, and over the test range, whilst a live fire exercise was taking place, that a boomerang-shaped craft appeared.
Very similar to the description of the flares one, isn't it? That.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a triangle boomerang type shape with the lights, kind of in a delta shape, really.
Yeah. But the interesting thing was that he said he looked through night vision goggles, which back in 2001, time when this happened, that he would only see like green, like it was the old versions. But he said when he was looking through them, he was seeing colour. He said, and he can't explain why he was seeing colour through what it should have been green night vision goggles. Then he said there was another shape to the top right of it, another V-shaped craft, lights-wise, that he felt was projecting a hologram of this boomerang-shaped craft. So he seemed to think it might have been like a hologram. But the weirdest thing was, apart from what comes next, is that it was never reported because he was told it was not an unidentified craft. It was just hovering there silently, boomerang shaped with lights. And they said, we don't need to report it because it's not unidentified. It's one of ours. Now, this guy, when you see him speaking, he has got a brain injury, and he says that at the start. He says, so I'll get a bit muddled at times. But he was genuinely, I felt he was coming across genuine. Again, he might not be. But this impact, the next bits that happened to him impacted his life and his wife and child and all sorts. Everything got impacted by the things that happened to him next, which he was driving, he was getting a pass to go off base with his wife to go to cinema. I think they said they were going to cinema. Needed to get a pass. They were on this road and it saw an object on the side of the road. So they stopped. He got out and this like plasma effect enveloped his wife, and he knew straight away it was like a plasma thing for whatever reason. It was like, I think it just looked like this weird like glowy plasma thing. And he went close to this object, which was like kind of like a pyramid on its side, but a sleek version, like a really long pyramid. It's quite difficult to explain. He does show a photo of it on. I've sent you the graphic. There's a diagram.
Yeah.
That sort of describes what he's seeing. It looks like, he said it was unlike anything he'd seen before, which I get that.
It's very detailed.
Pardon?
It's very detailed.
Very detailed, yeah. He said that he touched the craft and it was rock solid. It was hovering, but it was rock solid. You know, like when in Star Wars where they get out off one of those little craft things and it sort of like goes up and down, like suspension. He said it was nothing like it's rock solid. He said he was touching it and it felt like a cat's tongue or shark skin. It's quite specific, like a rough sandpapery kind of. Yeah. And he said it seemed to hum, like purring, like a creature. He said he felt like he was interacting with a living creature. Which is fucked up. And then he saw a portal open up.
He's got it all going on, hasn't he?
And something said to him that you're not supposed to see this. You shouldn't have seen this. It was like he was not meant to see that. That portal opening up. It gets a bit more outlandish after that. I won't go into that.
Jeez.
But yeah, that is...
That's a busy night.
Very busy. Not the same night, different night.
All right, okay.
But
I was going to say, fucking hell.
Yeah, if that happened to you in one night, I think you'd probably be get a bit crazy about it. Then we talked. There's another guy, a DC Long, whose father was contracted for Fort Bragg, which I'd heard of, Fort Bragg. When he was younger, he was about 13, he met up with a lot of high-ranking people. He used to go camping with his dad. His dad was a contractor, and they used to meet up, and he used to go and do stuff and whatnot with them. And one day, he was with his dad, and his dad got told to go to Range 19 of the JFK Warfare Center, met up with these guys, and got an escort to this bunker, and this bunker had loads of rubbish on it, all over it, like litter all over it. So he said it didn't look like a bunker. They went in there and went down in an elevator, like a freight elevator, down in his bunker. And when they opened the doors and got out, they were told to just look down, not look at anybody else, because they could be fired upon. So he said he knew it wasn't like an angry threat, but he'd done what he was told to do. So he just looked at the ankles of the person in front and then he caught something out of the corner of his eye, which in this room that they went into, which appeared to be a monolithic slab. He said it's about 100 tons. That's what he guessed it as. He caught out a glimpse of his eye. He said at that point he went down to pretend to tie up his shoelace so he could be on one knee so he could have a little look around. He said it was hovering. There was no means. It was not being held up. It was just hovering off the ground. He said there was two other rock formations hovering next to it. And on top was this black kind of box with some pipes. There's another diagram I sent you about that.
He was a kid.
He was 13 at this point.
Why did they send the kid into...
He was doing some work with his dad or something like that. So they went into this room. They were doing a live fire, speccing out some contracting stuff for a live fire thing in this bunker. 20 minutes later, they walked back into this room where this monolith was, and there was nothing in that room at all. Everything had gone. They got to the reception or whatever, and the dad was told that they needed to sign NDAs. His dad said, no, I'm not signing any NDAs because I didn't see anything, and I'm not having that. And the next day, one of the contractors turned up at the dad's business. He's a millionaire, this dad, got this big business. And all the contracting equipment, etc., had been taken and seized by the US government, including pencils, everything had been cleaned out. And within 24 hours, he went from being like this successful business guy, contractor for the military, millionaire, to basically lost everything. His dad became homeless, everything. Literally overnight, everything was destroyed because he didn't sign these NDAs.
Wow.
So,
like I said, this story
gets fucking more mental. So up to that point, it's pretty mental.
Yeah.
So later on, this guy, the young lad, the son, is in the military. He's got his career in the military. And he then is doing all his stuff. He's doing well in the military. He's going to do his parachute exercise, some big parachute exercise where loads of guys will jump out of planes at the same time. Anyway, so he's getting, where they hook a static line, and when they jump out the plane, the parachute opens. So he's ready to jump out the plane. He looks round, and another guy who's hooking up is one of the escorts from when he was 13 in the bunker. Right? Tapped him on the face, hooked the line, and all of a sudden he felt this snap. And they caught this static line and snapped his neck. So he fell out of the bloody aeroplane, right, with this massive injury. And they basically kicked him out of the army on medical grounds, saying, you can't do your job now. You're incapacitated.
Right, okay. Ugh, these stories are mad. Like the monolith, interesting. This one that comes up quite often.
Yeah.
Is that it kind of takes you back to like ancient times, don't it, when you think of monoliths? Like monolithic structures and kind of around the world you get these big slabs and stuff that have been there for thousands of years.
Yeah.
So I mean this story, I mean, a kid going into some sort of secret bunker in a bit, like if your dad had to go down there, and I think they'd leave someone with the kid out on the ground rather than take a kid into town just to look down, like and then if dad had this contracting business, has he got proof that his dad had this contracting business with the contracts? Surely there'd be something to sort of show that
it must have something
to back up that his dad was that person at least for some period of time.
Yeah.
Sort of
you'd like to think Steven Greer would do some kind of due diligence, but you don't know, do you?
And then if obviously they knew who this kid was for this next bit to happen where he's in the thingy with him. So when he initially signed up, would not have been better for them to kind of just block him going to the military at the very earliest point rather than
or maybe they didn't know to begin with, and then they caught wind of it. His name must have come up or something.
Odd.
It's very X-Files, isn't it?
It is.
I did think X-Files episode right there. So that was another one. But the weirdest one that came to me that I saw was a guy called Eric Hecker.
Right.
Raytheon contractor. Never heard of that before. So maybe that's just me not really knowing what's going on. In the South Pole. So Antarctic. He claimed right from the start that all of the evidence that he was about to share, he'd given to Arrow.
Right.
In documents. Again, it doesn't mean anything if it's bullshit. So who knows? So he was working at a South Pole station, Ice Cube Neutrino Observatories, which he believed from his time there was a multifaceted energy weapon. And not just like an observatory on the South Pole. This got my interest quite a lot because I thought that's quite a fucking bold statement to come out with, that you believe that this observatory that you're working on in Antarctica is an energy weapon. That's a whole nother level from crash retrieval and seeing UFOs by military contractors. This is... And he believed it was an air traffic control system for exotic vehicles. Let that sink in for a moment.
Right, let me... So an air traffic control system, so basically for exotic vehicles. So by exotic, are we meaning NHI or just like test?
He just says kind exotic of vehicles.
So you take it as NHI or possibly ET. Air traffic control system where they're basically communicating with aliens. Oh, you're free to come in. Sector B1. Come through. You're free to enter. 1 way clear. That's crazy.
Although, thinking about it, landed aircraft that we talked about, landed craft at the start. Guided in, allowed to land, given permission. Anyway, he also said that they had faster than light communications there. Whatever that means.
Light?
Yeah. So that's fiber optics on steroids, basically.
Because we don't know a way to get faster than light, do we?
No. And this is one bit that blew my mind. Gary McKinnon allegedly said he saw this as well, because he hacked NASA's...
The hacker, yeah.
Well, he didn't even hack them. They left their computers without passwords. So he just fucking entered the computers, which I don't know what's more insane, the fact that he was able to hack a NASA computer and military computers, or the fact that they had no password on their computer. Don't know. So he reckons in 2010 to 2011, they fired this thing up, which caused 2 earthquakes in New Zealand.
Right.
There was some massive earthquakes in New Zealand around that time, I do remember. And he reckons that it was this energy weapon that caused it. Now, this is a bold statement to be standing up in front of the world live and saying this.
I'd never heard this before.
No. And now this is something I need to look into, because it actually says this is an earthquake weapon. He said it had nefarious purposes. I was trying to make as many notes as I could while this guy was speaking. And they also fired a green laser out the top of the facility.
Does this sound like a supervillain?
Yeah.
Base.
But he didn't know if this green laser was some kind of comms, like laser communication, or whether it was part of a weapon. So there was power to the facility, obviously. He put some diagrams up, I don't really understand it all. But he said there was obviously some kind of secondary power supply there, because there was a lot of energy this thing's taking on. Then he says exotic power supply system that he thinks was actually in place before the Arctic Treaty. So the Arctic Treaty, from my understanding, without looking into this, is where all nations signed a treaty to say that they would not develop and dig up and whatnot the space around Antarctica on the South Pole. I think the same for the North Pole as well, but they all agreed that they would leave it untouched, basically, apart from these observatories and study things.
Yeah. God.
He put up a website. I haven't even been on the website yet. Deciphering TV. Again, I don't even know if I took that down right. I was literally trying to make notes. I was taking photographs of the screens at the same time.
Did a live stream on it.
It was a live stream, and I didn't want to pause it. I just wanted to crack through.
I can find a deciphering.tv website, and it's for CBD products.
Was it?
Unless he's flogging his cannabis wares.
Can't be that. I'll have to have a look into that. I might have to re-listen to it. That's what I took down, so I clearly got that wrong, so apologies. I'll try and update everybody on that. So that's kind of where it started to end.
Surely with something like this, like other countries would be aware, be watching.
What if they're all in on it?
But
even the people that are currently causing chaos around the world, i.e. Mr. Putin and his band of merry men.
So if they're in on it together, so a multinational conglomeration to develop this energy weapon and cause earthquakes, whatever the fuck it's doing. My first thought would be someone like Russia would want to own it.
Yep.
Especially if, like this guy says, it's for nefarious reasons. Unless they're waiting for it to be, it's not fully developed. They're waiting for it to be fully developed, then they start fighting over it. Would there be wars fought over this weapon if it had like power to basically
who there may be space wars going on that we don't know about. I know this seems fucking outlandish to start talking about. I get that, and it's wild as fuck, and it's not something that we would normally talk about. But
Raytheon,
Yep.
like a research
Yep.
company developing AI and aircraft and all sorts. So that side of it does sort of tie up that they would be involved possibly in something like this.
Yeah.
But did he give a reason for why he's telling us about it now?
I didn't get that.
Well,
I may have missed that because I was frantically taking some notes.
We should assume it doesn't work for him anymore. If he's
no, he had a fucking uniform on, like he had a badge on and everything on his t-shirt. I'm assuming he can't work for him now, but maybe this was his resignation speech.
That's his get on a live speech, if it's true.
Yeah.
And
but David Grusch, going back to him briefly, he's had retaliations. So it's not unheard of that these people, by speaking out, are actually exposing themselves and their immediate family to potential unalive situations and being suicided and
wow.
I mean this press conference was a whole nother level compared to what we've been used to through the congressional meetings and such like. And looking at UFO Twitter, and as I say, I've reached out to certain friends of ours on social media. One of the comments was, the thing about Greer is he doesn't vet his sources of witnesses very well. So you get a mixed bag of testimony that you don't know who to believe, which is true because some of those stories, you kind of go, well, actually, some of that sounds...
Kind of reminds me of Linda Moulton Howe a little bit, where she she believes everything she's told.
Yeah.
And is Greer kind of doing a similar thing with these? So people want the platform for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Want this.
I think one of the comments was that UFO community or UAP community has moved on quite a bit recently from not really having a great deal to now got congressional hearings, we've got whistleblowers coming out, and that this was Steven Greer trying to accelerate himself back up to
get a bit relevant.
Yeah, because the whole CE5 path that he created for himself and the fact that he was just milking people for money, basically, that it became quite irrelevant. But again,
I suppose even if he knows half of this is bullshit, it's getting people talking about him.
Yeah.
And getting his name kind of in there.
Yeah. So, what do you think then, Ash? So, it's all mental.
I need to go and watch it. I need to find 3 hours to sit through these stories.
What you need to do is follow Ryan Sprague on Twitter, because he posted up this morning that he got 3 hours to spare and he was going to go and watch it. So I went through that feed to see if I could see if he'd updated. He hadn't. So,
right. Fucking hell. 3 hours.
Yeah. But who knows? Who knows? These people could be telling the truth. I got the impression that certainly parts of the versions they were telling us seem to be credible to me. Whether or not they are, I don't know. But you don't know. It's without proof, it's very hard to disprove somebody.
Like you say, there must be risks in going forward and talking about it.
Yeah.
Let's say it's military and stuff.
Yeah.
Because these people will have signed, and if they are working on this stuff or they have seen this stuff, they will have signed NDAs and stuff. Had to work on this South Pole energy weapon creating base for air traffic control for exotic vehicles. they're going to have NDAs. That's a true thing that they're now breaking.
So exotic vehicles to me reminds me of like Black Project Tech, like Skunk Works, Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, those kind of things, rather than alien, for want of a better phrase, technology. Certainly nowadays, where we're talking NHI and stuff, exotic tech, like you have an exotic car, that's a super quick production car, like a Ferrari or something like that, but a known technology. So I don't know. We're living in interesting times, Ash. We really are.
The last couple of weeks and months just seem to be taking off a little bit.
It's mental, isn't it? If we're not getting close to something big coming out, like huge, I don't know when in history we've ever been like this.
Well, briefly on this Steven Greer thing, he says that there is a clock being put on it, and it's supposed to be resolved by the end of this year.
Okay.
Apparently, I was reading that on Twitter. Apparently, one of the comments that he made. Apparently, supposed to get answers this year, but that's coming from Greer. So
he's asked for pro bono lawyers and stuff like that. So lawyers who are prepared to work for nothing, essentially, to help push and move towards disclosure from the government and stuff like that. So is he becoming relevant again? I don't think he ever will be. He didn't look very well, bless him. He did look like he's seen better days.
right.
And that was a few comments I'd seen there. He didn't look very well. Well, that's just an opinion of mine as well. He didn't look like his normal self from like Unacknowledged documentary.
Yeah.
But stressful times for a lot of people, I think.
Cool. So yeah, a lot of information.
Yeah.
Try and just digest kind of as it's happening.
And we haven't even talked about the Las Vegas incident yet. Maybe we'll save that for
we can
next week.
Save that. And I think like a
It
lot
was
of
a
this
meteor.
stuff was it? And a fake video.
So please, very quickly, there was camera footage of what appeared to be this object falling to the ground. It was just a meteor going across the sky. I've seen it loads of times here. Yeah. But the rest of it I don't know about. But we'll discuss that.
Cool. Yeah, and as a footnote, we're just trying to digest this ourselves, work it out. We could be completely off with our interpretations of what like David Grusch has said and stuff, and let us know your thoughts. And your thoughts on our opinions. Tell us we're complete batshit wrong about it, whatever it might be. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, hope you enjoyed listening.
Especially extended version.
Yes. Just trying to go through everything that's happening. Seems to be a lot of stuff happening to me, like you say, trying to just get through it. And I've not been here either.
And I feel like we've just skimmed it, really. I don't feel like we've had I think we could have spoke for hours on this, so maybe we'll have to do an update in the coming weeks once it all settles again. So, But yeah.
Cool.
Nice one, Ash. Always a pleasure.
Always. We shall see you all soon.
Bye.
Pursuit of the Paranormal with Ash and Greg.